Quick question for anybody watching this video, man, woman, teenager, old person, elderly, whatever. If somebody starved you of food, what would happen to you? Would you die? Eventually. You would die. If somebody starved me, would I die? Eventually. You may last longer than me. I may last longer than you. But we'd both die. We know what the result would be. If I starved you of water or any kind of liquid to drink, would you survive? For a while. But eventually you would die of thirst. And it would be a brutal death, just like starving would be. You wouldn't make it. You'd eventually die. If somebody starved me of water, or, any kind of liquid, Coke or tea or anything else, would I live? For a while. But I'd eventually die if I don't get any nourishment, just like you. I may last longer than you. You may last longer than me. But we'd both eventually die. If I left you out in the desert, what would happen to you after a while? Well, after a while, you're going to die. Especially if there's no water around that you can drink, you'll die faster. If somebody left me out in the desert, what would happen to me? Would you die? Of course I would. Eventually. As I said, just like with him, quicker than me. If there was no water, eventually I would die. My body would give out. You may last longer than me. I may last longer than you. But we would both die. If I left you out in the cold, what would you do? You'd freeze to death eventually. If you can't get in a warm place, you would die and freeze to death. What would happen if somebody left me out in the cold? I'd freeze to death. You may last longer than me. I might last longer than you. But we'd both eventually die. There's a cause and effect, is what I'm getting at here. So I won't give any more examples. You do something to somebody for long enough, there's going to be an effect. Cause, effect. Something's going to happen. If I shot you a bunch of times with a gun, will you die? Yeah, probably eventually. Just I would as well. Stab, whatever. So I want to ask anybody, whether you are a incel loser, I'm just using that, the sub 5 guy, if you are a normie, if you were the ultimate Chad, how would you be if you never really had any friends in your life, or you had very few? That you were alone most of the time. How would you feel? How would you feel if people treated you poorly most of the time? Maybe not every waking second of your day, but most of the time. How would you be? Would you be okay? Would you be normal? Would you be happy? Would you be confident? I don't think so. If you got picked on every single day, or at least most days, we won't go too extreme, but you were picked on most days, got bullied, picked on, teased, maybe even physically beat up, how would you be if that happened to you a lot? Would you just walk around with your head held high and not worry about it? Would you be smiling most days? Would you be psychologically normal? No, you wouldn't be. What if you went most of your life, through your teens, maybe even into your 20s, into your 30s, and 40s and beyond? We won't even go past that. And you never had a girlfriend. You never were in a serious relationship. You never dated. Never had sex. Not even with a prostitute. We won't even count prostitution. Never had sex. What would you be like? What kind of person would you be? Man or woman? Never had any of those things. Would you be normal? Would you be happy? Would you just go through life and say, you know what, that ain't going to bother me one bit. I'm going to live my life, and I'm not even going to worry about it, because I'll deal with it. Unlike these other losers that have this problem, I'm just going to deal with it. And I don't even care if I have any of that. Would you be like that? Would you be? Would you just bounce back and, you'd be that special person that beats the odds and that one exception to the rule? Would you be like that? What if you never had any money, hardly? And it wasn't your fault. It's not. I don't mean a guy that's just lazy or a girl that's just lazy and doesn't want to do anything. I don't mean that. What would you be like, though, if you had no money? We'll even say lazy. Fine, we'll just put that in there. Whether you're lazy or you're handicapped for some reason, but you ain't got no money. What would you be like? Didn't have no money to do nothing. Couldn't have no fun. Couldn't take a trip. Obviously, as a man, can't date. Can't have a relationship. Can't get married if you ain't got no money. We know the rules. All guys know that rule. What would you be like? Would you be happy? I don't think you would be. I don't think you'd be happy at all. Some of you would be worse than others. Certainly. Some would deal with it a little better than others. But you'd all be miserable. All of you. What if you had a mental condition? Well, I don't want to call it a mental condition. What if you were autistic? And you were either high functioning, well, I'm not going to use that term because that's not used anymore. We'll just say it in simple terms. What if you were severely autistic? Well, if you were severely, you probably wouldn't be able to make many decisions at all anyway. But what if you were halfway? Enough that you struggle, but not enough that people would perceive you right off the bat as handicapped. They're not just going to look at you from a distance and go, whoa, there's something wrong with this guy, like Down syndrome or something like that, If you had that kind of autism, what would you be like? Would you be happy? Would you just deal with it? Just wake up and say, you know what, I ain't worried about it at all. Would you have a good job if you had that problem? Would you? Would you be able to have a good job? Would you be able to fix things easily? Would you be good with your hands? Would you be driving at 16? Would you have a lot of friends? Because I can tell you, if you are at least halfway on that autistic spectrum, you won't have any of those things. Maybe one of them. Maybe. And that's probably if you have parents that really help you and they're very involved. What if you couldn't drive at 16 and maybe you didn't get your license till much, much later in your life? What would you be like? A woman and a man are very different. Let's just say men. What would you be like as a man? Because I guarantee you wouldn't date, wouldn't have a girlfriend, wouldn't have a relationship. What would you be like? Would you be normal? I don't think so. So what am I saying here? When I gave all those comparisons from the starving and no water, what am I trying to say here? You're not special, is what I'm trying to say. People look at the incel problem. People look at the autism problem. People look at the benzo withdrawal problem. And they just say, hey, why don't y'all deal with this better? I know, because I get it from all three. I get it from people with, because I have all three of these. Oh, I'd deal with it better if I was you. Oh, you should be doing better in your life. You're just a big loser, don't want to get off his butt and get a job. Oh, you ain't suffering that bad. Them symptoms ain't that bad. Really? Would you deal with them, or would you or could the problem be, could it just be if you took 5 seconds to think about it, would you be just like me?